Chapter 1336 Practice. Daiji has always been busy with the trivial matters of Songjia Temple. The funeral master did not know how to take care of these, so he only showed up at the beginning and did not come out again. When Daiji and others went to the meeting, the funeral master was chanting in the Great Light Hall. Wanghua Sengji walked in, and the funeral master turned around when he heard the voice. Seeing that it was Wanghua Sengji, he showed a hint of surprise on his face. Chiba. He still bowed to Wanghua Sengji respectfully. Wanghua Sengji looked at the funeral master with a loving face. Father, I haven't seen you for a long time. Have you made progress in Buddhism? The funeral master frowned slightly. My disciple has been disturbed by external things recently, so I can't practice Buddhism with a calm mind. So there is some delay. Wanghua Sengji nodded. That's right. Huh? Chiba, what do you mean? The funeral master asked with a surprised look on his face. Can being disturbed by external things help me practice Buddhism? Wanghua Sengji chanted a Buddhist name. Amitabha. The worldly world is a place to refine one's mind. One needs to experience the world before one can finally achieve enlightenment. In the past, the Buddha Sakyamuni experienced the joys, sorrows, anger, and happiness of the world, and finally realized everything and entered the Buddhist world. If you want to let go, you need to pick it up first. You haven't experienced it, so how can you see through it? The funeral master suddenly realized and put his hands together and bowed. Chiba, I'm grateful for your teaching. Wanghua Sengji nodded with satisfaction. Today, your practice has reached a bottleneck. It's time to teach you the next lesson. The funeral master's face was filled with excitement. Chiba, what is the next lesson? To understand the worldly world, see through all desires, and finally understand the mystery of Buddhism. He turned around and walked out. Come with me. The funeral master had special respect for Wanghua Sengji. When he heard that this great monk was going to teach him new Buddhist teachings, he naturally followed him in a hurry. Wanghua Sengji took him to a secret room at the back. He said to him, Go in. Whether you can comprehend it thoroughly depends on yourself. The funeral master didn't know what was inside, but when he came to the door, everything he saw made his eyes dull for a moment, and his pupils shrank slightly. He saw a woman appear in the room. She was wearing a red and white dress, with a gentle and loving face, beautiful appearance, and plump size, all of which showed her maternal characteristics. Chiba, this is... The funeral master hesitated. Wanghua Sengji pushed him directly. Go. You have to defeat your inner demons. Remember, everything is a red skeleton. The funeral master stumbled into the room. When he looked up, he saw the beautiful and maternal woman in front of him lowering her head and looking at him gently. Are you okay? She stretched out her white and tender hand to him. I am here to help you practice. Child, come here. The words, child, come here, directly touched the softest part of the funeral master's heart. He had no experience in this field, so he didn't know what to do. However, the one opposite him was a top expert with a combat power of 9,999 in this field. He didn't need to do anything. Lu Ruyan guided him forward with ease. The funeral master was very immature at the beginning. He entered the Buddhist and demonic world at the age of 8. He had hardly heard of the relationship between men and women, let alone understanding it. No one dared to talk about that kind of thing in front of the sacred funeral master. But for an adult man, the instinct of his body would make him explore from the bottom of his heart. And today, a skinny horse from the Jiangnan region taught him a lot of beauty in life. There are only a few days left before the door of the demon kingdom is opened, and the entire snowy plateau suddenly fell into a dead silence. Whether it is between the 4 major families or the rebels, they all fell into peace tacitly at this time. However, those who understand the current situation understand that this is just the tranquility before the blizzard. The calmer it is now, the more fierce the outbreak will be later. Songjia Temple. Daiji sat on the sofa in his study, wearing a big red robe symbolizing the Chiba of Songjia Temple, twisting the rosary in his hand. In front of him, 3 backbones of the Yashalengtai family stood obediently, waiting for Daiji to assign tasks. Daiji said to them, The gate of the demon kingdom will be open soon, and I must go there with the funeral master. Because I am worried that the rebels will cause trouble, I let Paji Gasang take charge of maintaining order in the snowy plateau. A man with thick long hair asked, "Uncle, why don't you let us do this? Instead, give it to Paji Gasang?" Deji said, "The heads of our 3 families and the elite will not be here at that time. If I let you take charge, will Paji Gasang listen to you? But won't we let him control us?" The man named Baru asked in confusion. Deji said, "No, you should manage the troops in your hands. If there is a surprise attack by the rebels, you can obey his orders. Otherwise..." Chapter 1337. The Army Gathers. Deji heard that the funeral master was devoted to Buddhism, and nodded lightly. After all, the funeral master was fascinated by Buddhism, and he had spent most of his life studying Buddhist scriptures. Deji walked towards the funeral master's quiet room in the west courtyard. When he came to the outside of the courtyard, he stretched out his hand and knocked on the door, then stepped back half a step. After a while, the courtyard door opened with a creak. The funeral master stood in front of Deji, looking at him with a smile in his eyes. Deji suddenly felt that the funeral master had changed. It was an indescribable change. The person was still the same person, but the temperament was very different. Deji didn't know that in these few days, the funeral master had become a real man. The transformation between a man and a boy was so obvious. The funeral master and Lu Ruyan had been meditating for several days, and he felt that all the confusions in the past had been cleared up. He finally understood what love in the world was, and his heart was clear. "Deji Chiba." The funeral master greeted. "Master, we are about to go to the Great Snow Mountain. Are you ready? This trip is probably extremely dangerous, so you need to be very careful." Master raised his mouth and smiled, saying, "Everything is inevitable. The history of the demonic kingdom is destined to end." His tone at this time was more like that of a real man. Master looked at the towering Great Snow Mountain in the distance. "I will make everything return to the way it should be." Deji thought about it and thought that Master had made a breakthrough in studying Buddhist scriptures, so he nodded approvingly. "I am also honored to witness history." In a few days, the 4 major families gathered the most elite warriors in their families. Among them were aliens with strong combat power and auxiliary capabilities, and special soldiers who were proficient in various skills. It can be said that each family had a lot of their own money. After all, the legendary demonic kingdom was extremely dangerous, and they had to make full preparations to ensure the successful acquisition of the demonic kingdom's treasure. Because of this, they asked Paji Gasang to stay and coordinate the affairs of the snowy plateau. Needless to say, with the help of Zhang Yi and his men, the top combat power level does not need to be worried. They are only equipped with some people with special skills led by Cheongda, and there are about 500 people. The same is true for the Shaza family and the Ramin family. The snowy plateau is turbulent, but time still passes like this, and soon it comes to the agreed day. On this day, the troops of the 4 major families gathered in the huge square in front of the Songjia temple. Zhang Yi and his men were mixed in the team, and everyone was wearing combat uniforms, so their faces could not be seen clearly. However, because the weapons were too advanced, it was still easy to be recognized as mercenaries. In addition to them, the Paji family had other recruited personnel. Zhang Yi had seen them several times, and there were even 2 aliens with more than 9,000 points. Paji Gasang also paid a lot to invite them. On the huge square, the 4 chieftain families and the monks of Songjia Temple, adding up to 2,000 to 3,000 people, were spectacular. Zhang Yi's eyes swept across the camps of other families and indeed saw people who stood out like them. The clothes were too obvious. Combat uniforms are required for combat. It is impossible to deliberately wear the old styles of the local snowy area to conceal one's identity. Those guys are too easy to recognize. Just beat them up based on their clothes. Uncle Yu hugged his sturdy arms, with a cold smile on his face. After knowing that these people were likely from other countries, he set his sights on these guys. "But aren't they targeting us as well?" "Fatty," Su said worriedly. Zhang Yi's mouth slightly raised, and he said leisurely, We have known each other for a long time, but we may not be able to fully confirm each other's identities for the time being. Next, it depends on who has the better skills. He lowered his head, revealing a cat's head in the middle of his collar. Hua hid in his clothes and closed his eyes to take a nap. Zhang Yi touched the cat's head. I remind you again, don't leave me after you set off. I have a hunch. His eyes were deep, as if a dark tide was surging. This time, many people will die. Zhang Yi's words made Fatty Su shrink his neck. He once wanted to apply to Zhang Yi to enter Mu Yan's shadow space to wait, but was rejected by Zhang Yi mercilessly. Fatty Su's talent is not high in the team, but it is also a combat-type ability. This ability must be constantly honed and grown through continuous fighting. Otherwise, what use is he? Making ice cream at home? When Zhang Yi looked at those people were also looking at the mercenaries in other military formations. Behind Ramin Oju, the tall alien in snow-white combat uniform folded his arms, not hiding his eyes at all, and looked at the aliens in the surrounding teams unscrupulously. Ramin Oju wore a black bearskin coat, and his slightly pale face always looked arrogant. But about to enter the Demon Kingdom, the head of the Ramin family also felt a little nervous. She looked at the tall stranger beside her and whispered, "Mr. Lancelot, are you sure about this operation?" Hearing this, Lancelot smiled and snorted. "Of course. Who do you think I am?" He leaned down and asked. He leaned down and whispered in Lumin Oju's ear, "Just wait to become the new king of the snowy land. When I get the things under the snowy mountain, I will also make your wish come true." Lumin Oju took a deep breath, and she didn't completely trust Lancelot's words. But now, apart from trusting him, she had no other way to go. In the Shazov family, among several aliens wearing dark gold combat uniforms, a pair of eyes were quietly looking around. Barada worships gold, so their combat uniforms are mostly gold. Of course, with the current optical technology, color camouflage is not a difficult task. This kind of gold will not reflect light in the snow, and it can only be seen clearly at a close distance. A pair of eyes fell on Zhang Yi and others in the distance, with a bit of caution. Seeing this, Xia Jiatsua approached and asked, "What's wrong? Did you encounter any difficult characters?" The golden-armored stranger turned around and smiled faintly. "You should be mentally prepared. This time, there are more than one wolf coming for the treasure of the Demon Kingdom." Xia Jiatsua's eyes sank slightly. "More people are good. With more people, we have a chance to fish in troubled waters." He looked at the tall and majestic Songjia Temple. The funeral master and Deji had already arrived in front of everyone. If we rely on ourselves, trying to seize the treasure from the Songjia Temple is like snatching food from a tiger's mouth. But now that there are people who are disrupting the situation, our chances are even greater. The golden-armored stranger said with a smile, "It's not that the chances are greater." He restrained his smile, his eyes focused and full of confidence. "But we must get those things from the Demon Kingdom." Chapter 1338. A Mountain of Bones. New Rebel Camp. Snow Mountain Eagle Luojua looked at the distant mountains. The mountains in front of him were as calm as if they were dead, as if nothing could disturb them. But when he thought of what was going to happen next, Luojua couldn't help but open his mouth and take a breath of cold air. After waiting for 2.5 years, it's finally time to put an end to things. Zhuoma walked to Luojua's side and looked at him with some worry. "Eagle Master, are you really going to the Demon Kingdom? It's too dangerous there, and if you're not there, we may not be able to succeed alone." Luojua had told them that after all the masters of the snow region went to the Demon Kingdom, it would be the time when the 4 Tusi families and the Songjia Temple would be empty. It would be the best time to launch an attack. However, Zhuoma was not at ease. The rebels were too weak. With their strength, if Luojua was not considered, they could not even compete with the family. Luojua showed a mysterious smile on his face. "Do you think our strength is weak?" Zhuoma heard this and subconsciously looked back at the old, weak and sick people in the camp. 70% of the rebels were old and weak, and only 30% were available fighters. Luojua smiled and said, "Don't forget, a spark can start a prairie fire." I have already sown countless seeds in the past 2.5 years, in the 4 major families and Songjia Temple. Now, these seeds are about to burn fiercely. Zhuoma was surprised and said, "You mean the hidden lines you planted?" Luo Zhuo's hidden lines were only known to him. Those people had been dormant for a long time, and some of them had even been his people from the beginning, but in the past, they had never received any missions. Because Luo Zhuo told them that they would only show up when a full-scale war broke out. On weekdays, even if their comrades died tragically in front of them, they had to act indifferent. Luo Zhuo narrowed his eyes and felt very happy. Everything, just for this day. As long as I prevent Juegwa and the chieftains from getting the treasure of the Demon Kingdom, we can win the final victory. He let out a long roar, and the 2 huge golden wings behind him spread out with its tongue, and the whole person turned into a huge golden-winged rock and flew out of the mountains and rivers. After everyone gathered, Deji pretended to shout a few words, which were all formal words, asking everyone to obey the orders of the funeral master and him after entering the Demon Kingdom. Then, the army set out. Paji Gasang stayed to guard the house, but with Zhang Yi there, it didn't matter whether he went or not. He said to Zhang Yi, "The team is in your hands. As long as there is a need, they can sacrifice. Please don't be soft-hearted." Zhang Yi sighed. "Although I can't bear it, I have to do this for the sake of justice." The team set out in a mighty manner and set off for the Great Snow Mountain. Although Paji Gasang would not enter the underground Demon Kingdom, he still sent Zhang Yi and others all the way to the Great Snow Mountain. When Zhang Yi came here for the first time, he directly used the primitive method to find that place through space travel. However, it is difficult for ordinary people to find that place without the guidance of the 4 chieftains when they come here. Because the entrance is very hidden, and the underground path is tortuous and complicated. This time Zhang Yi followed the large army, and it took dozens of minutes to reach the underground entrance. It was still the familiar place, with a huge bluestone door and a whole open space in front of it that had become a pool of blood. A foul stench made everyone frown. The smell was not the ordinary smell of blood, but mixed with the smell of decay. A lama from Songjia Temple came out and released a large amount of flames with his hand. Soon the scorching temperature evaporated the pool of blood. Deji took the lead, and the other 3 chieftains followed closely. They each took out a stone slab and stuffed it into the obscure groove on the bluestone door. "This is probably the key that Paji Gasang mentioned," Zhang Yi muttered to himself. He remembered what the funeral master did to the bluestone door when he came here last time. It seems that in order to open this door, in addition to having a key, you also need to rely on a strong enough force to do it. And it is obvious that the funeral master himself can't do it. Yang Xinxin's voice came on the communication channel. Zhang Yi heard this and couldn't help but say, "This stone door is like a seal, which has great restrictions on supernatural powers. Since we can't break through it by our own strength, the power behind the door must not be able to break through it either." But at this time, Yang Xinxin said something shocking. Perhaps 1,000 years ago, the people who built this bluestone door deliberately set strict conditions for opening the door, just to prevent future generations from overestimating their own abilities and forcibly opening the stone door. In other words, only those who have enough power to open the stone door can collide with the so-called power of the demon country behind the stone door. But now, the funeral master also relied on your power to do this. Yang Xinxin's words pointed out the crux of the problem. The power behind the stone door must be terrifying. Even the hero King Geezer 1,000 years ago could only use the stone door to isolate the 2 worlds, but could not completely destroy the demon country. But everyone at the scene, everyone has their own evil intentions, and they are still fighting with each other. After entering the stone gate, can they really succeed in getting the treasure of the Demon Kingdom without working together? Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes slightly and silently took a half step back. After the 4 chieftains stuffed the stone slab into the bluestone door, the funeral master Juegwa walked over. He stretched out his powerful palm and placed it on the bluestone door, and a hint of incomprehensible color flashed in his eyes. He was a little dazed but a little familiar. But soon, his eyes became firm. Boom. As he exerted force with his palm, the giant stone door that was 50 meters high was pushed open inch by inch. Soon a gap was opened. But as the gap opened, everyone immediately heard a gloomy and terrifying laugh coming from behind the stone door. Zhang Yi stared at the stone door, and after the ability of tracking all things locked the stone door, he would take his people away as soon as there was any danger. Hua-la-la dash. A sound like a tide sounded, and the tide seemed to be carrying a large number of pebbles. A white light flashed before the funeral master's eyes, and then a skull came straight at his face. His figure quickly retreated, and the next moment, a white tide rushed out from behind the stone gate. Everyone was shocked. It was not easy for more than 2,000 people to retreat in a small space, and many people were swallowed up by the white wave in an instant. Zhang Yi hid behind and dodged in time, so he was not affected. But soon, they saw clearly what the white wave was. It turned out to be a pile of white bones. The white bones poured out from behind the stone gate and soon piled up like a mountain in front of the gate. Deji said to everyone, "Don't panic. These bones, and the blood before, are just the relics that King Geezer and Guru Padmasambhava used to seal the demons." Chapter 1339 Blood Sea. With the help of Yang Xinxin, Zhang Yi had previously looked up historical materials on the snowy plateau. The master Padmasambhava was also a master of Tantric Buddhism. It was he who overthrew the demon kingdom together with King Geezer. Deji Tripa, are you saying that this is a sealed object? A person in the crowd spoke slowly. He was a mercenary from the Xiaozhou family. Deji looked at him slowly, and in order to make everyone less afraid, he began to explain. This door is called the Gate of Eternal Destruction. After King Geezer defeated the demon kingdom, they fled back to the demon abyss underground. It is said that the power of the demons comes from the demon abyss. They have to make sacrifices to the demon abyss every day to maintain their power. And that is also their final destination. King Geezer and Master Padmasambhava once tried to attack the demon abyss, but the environment there was extremely harsh and not suitable for ordinary people to survive. Their army was uncomfortable as soon as they entered. Finally, King Geezer built this gate of eternal destruction under the advice of Master Padmasambhava and predicted that one day whoever opens this door will be able to completely solve the disaster of the demon kingdom. He pointed to the white bones in front of him. Inside this door, there are the flesh and blood of 100,000 demons and fallen soldiers. Their bodies are piled behind the door. The dead have set up a barrier to prevent the demons from appearing again. Only then did everyone know the origin of these bones. 100,000 people, there are only a few words in the history books, but it is very shocking to see it with your own eyes. Everyone, let's go. Remember, the demon country is very dangerous. You must follow our orders along the way. Otherwise, you will bear the consequences. Deji glanced at the people from the other three families, and the warning in his tone was clear. When the stale air behind the stone door dissipated, the funeral master took the lead in entering the gate of the demon country. The monks of the Yashalangtai family and the private soldiers of the Songjia temple followed closely behind. Zhang Yi took a look at the door. It was dark and nothing could be seen clearly, but there was a gloomy and terrifying atmosphere, as if a pair of eyes were staring at everyone in the dark, making people's backs cold. The people from other families looked at each other, and then followed. With the funeral master leading the way, they felt much more at ease. Paji Gesang said goodbye to Zhang Yi and left. Then, Zhang Yi took his companions and the 500 elite soldiers of the Paji family and walked into the mysterious stone gate. Everyone was fully armed and wore combat uniforms. Zhang Yi was not worried about being attacked suddenly because he had the ability of tracing all things. But after entering the stone gate, Zhang Yi was shocked by the world in front of him. Hualala. After Fatty Su came out, he almost couldn't stand still. If Uncle Yu hadn't supported him in time, he would have fallen to the ground. It was not because he would fall flat on his face, but because after walking out of the stone gate, they found that there was a huge skull mountain behind the door. The bones were piled up into a mountain, and the stone gate was in the middle of this mountain. They were all bones in front of them, and they would fall into it if they were not careful. And the more terrifying thing was not this. Zhang Yi walked slowly up the bone mountain, looking into the distance, and his heart was shocked beyond words. Everyone followed and looked at everything in front of them from a high place, and they were also shocked. Because outside the bone mountain, there was an endless ocean, bloody, extremely smelly, and exuding a strong smell of death. Zhang Yi just knew where the blood water he saw at the beginning came from. The blood sea was so huge that you couldn't see the end at a glance. The blood sea was lingering with purple miasma, which was a terrifying poison. If you didn't come in wearing combat uniforms, you would die if you took a breath of this breath. More than 2,000 people walked out of the stone gate, but they didn't expect to encounter such a scene first. But they were not unprepared. On the side of the Yashalingtai family, a soldier immediately opened the backpack behind him, took out a ball of leather, and then quickly turned it into a kayak on the sea of blood. Soon, dozens of kayaks appeared on the seashore. They got on the kayaks and drove to the opposite side. The other families were also prepared. Because underground rivers are prone to appear, the preparation of such tools is not without reason. Cheongda came over and asked Zhang Yi to go with them to take a kayak. Zhang Yi thought about it and did not refuse. Although he can fly, he didn't want to be too conspicuous at this time. The four of them, along with a cat, took a kayak with Cheongda, and 2 soldiers were responsible for rowing. Hundreds of kayaks paddled forward slowly. No one knew what they would encounter here, so they didn't dare to run too fast. On the side of the Paji family, a soldier put his hand in the blood river and moved it, then said to Cheongda and Zhang Yi, "Captain, Mr. A, there is a very strong corpse poison in this water, and no living creature can survive in it." The soldier was an alien who could control poison, so he was not worried about being eroded. Cheongda nodded. "That's good. Such a large sea of blood. If a monster suddenly appears and attacks us, it will be troublesome." Although they were wearing combat uniforms, it was obviously impossible to swim across this endless sea of blood. Once the kayak was destroyed, they were basically finished. As soon as Cheongda finished speaking, a scream suddenly sounded not far away. "Ah!" Zhang Yi and Cheongda's eyes tightened, and they quickly looked in the direction of the sound. I saw a soldier pointing at the distance with a panicked face. There is something." Everyone looked in the direction of his finger, and sure enough, there was something rising and falling in the sea of blood. Soon, the same shouts came from other places. "There are people. There are people in the water. There are people here too. Prepare for battle." The soldiers came here with the determination to die. But when facing strange things, the fear in their hearts could not be concealed. At this moment, a fat lama from Songjia Temple stood up and looked at a water wave with sharp eyes. He took out a long chain from his sleeve, aimed at it, and threw it hard. Wow! The sound of water sounded, and a bloody shadow was dragged out of the sea of blood. The fat llama threw the thing onto the boat cautiously, took a closer look, and suddenly sneered. "I thought it was something else." It turned out to be a corpse. He shouted to the people around, "Don't worry, it's just a corpse." When the people around heard that it was a corpse, they relaxed a lot, thinking it was some strange creature. But Zhang Yi and others did not dare to be careless. "No. How could there be a corpse here?" Zhang Yi shouted. This aroused everyone's vigilance. The corpse was well preserved, as if it had just died not long ago. The tide was rising and falling. Where did so many dead bodies come from? Chapter 1340, Three-Eyed Corpse. The poison controller explained, the poison can kill the microorganisms on the corpse, so that it will not decay for a long time. At Pudge's house, someone also salvaged a corpse. Zhang Yi and his companions went over and took a closer look. As expected, they found that the corpse had a strange appearance. His clothes had been stained red, and his appearance was unclear, but his height was much taller than that of ordinary people, about 2 meters and 5 or 6. The most eye-catching thing was that there was an eye pattern deeply engraved on his head. If you don't look carefully, you would think he had 3 eyes. Deji took a breath and immediately said to everyone, "This is the demon from the demon kingdom." According to the records in ancient books, the demons are tall, and the tallest can even reach more than 2 meters tall. And they worship the magic eye, and every demon will have the magic eye pattern engraved on his forehead. The corpse of the demon was found here. Sure enough, they have not perished yet and are still living and multiplying. We came to the right place. Everyone didn't expect that they would encounter the demons so soon. Although they are dead bodies, this also proves that their enemy is on the other side of the sea. Yang Xinxin said, such a huge sea of blood is actually made of corpses. Combined with the dense mountain of bones he saw before, Liang Yu couldn't help but say a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Zhang Yi's eyes swept around coldly, and the sea of blood flowed slowly, undulating slightly, and there was a dead silence as a whole. The mountain of corpses is the seal of the tantric sect to stop the demons. Then the sea of blood may be the seal of the demon kingdom to block the army of King Geezer. In that battle, both sides had fought to the point of collapse, so they chose to take a step back. King Geezer won, and it was also a hard-won victory, so he chose to continue this battle to future generations. If the Burial Master is really the reincarnation of generations, then the Burial Master, he looked at the kayak where the Burial Master was in the distance, is he personally solving the unsolved problems thousands of years ago after 1,000 years? Just as Zhang Yi was thinking, suddenly, the ability to predict the danger of all things following the traces made him feel some kind of change. Without saying a word, he immediately pulled Xiongda and Fatty Su, who were closest to him, to the back. The corpse on the kayak suddenly opened his eyes. The kayak was not big, and there were several soldiers around him observing the corpse. As a result, the corpse suddenly sat up straight, then opened his mouth and spit out a black light at the private soldier in front of him. Puff! The soldier's chest was directly pierced, leaving only a blood hole that was transparent from front to back. He screamed, and his heart had been eaten. The black shadow flashed by and sank into the sea of blood. The other bodies that were salvaged were no different, and they all attacked the surrounding soldiers who were caught off guard. This attack was too sudden. Even though there were powerful aliens on the scene, no one expected that the corpse soaked in the sea of blood would suddenly attack and injure people. Immediately, more than a dozen soldiers received lunchboxes. Such turmoil immediately made everyone nervous. What was that just now? I don't know, it was too fast, killing more than a dozen people at once. Deji ordered with a sullen face. Throw the bodies down quickly. Be on guard. Zhang Yi held a black adamantium long knife in his hand, and he would take action immediately if there was any abnormal movement. The soldiers quickly threw the bodies off the boat, and at the same time took out their weapons to prepare for the strange things in the sea of blood. Hee hee hee. Ha 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 ha. Waves of laughter echoed in the sea of blood, like the cries of ghosts, extremely creepy. The calm sea of blood suddenly began to surge with waves, and then turned into turbulent waves, rushing towards the fleet. These kayaks are not big, and they can't withstand the huge wind and waves. Once they are blown over, most of the people present will suffer. On the Ramin family side, a mercenary stood up, touched his thumbs and index fingers with both hands, forming a heart-shaped gesture, pointing to the direction of the blood waves. Ding Fungbua. Under his command, the sea of blood in front of him also rolled up, and a huge wave surged up and crashed into the waves on the other side. Boom. Crash. The two waves collided and offset each other, so that the fleet's formation was not disrupted. But as the waves slowly calmed down, bloody corpses emerged from the sea of blood one after another. They were all wrapped in a layer of bloody linen, and there were magic eyes engraved on their heads. Maybe the linen was not bloody, but it had long been thoroughly stained by the filth in the sea of blood. Ha ha ha! The laughter seemed to come from these corpses. The entire sea of blood was filled with corpses at some point. In all directions, corpses were laughing. Even these determined warriors were shocked by such a strange scene, and their faces turned pale. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. The laughter was getting closer and closer, and more corpses rushed towards the fleet in the sea of blood, quickly blocking all the retreat routes around. Zhou Kuo and the others in the shadow space couldn't help but swallow their saliva when they saw the scene, and dared not to look any further. Playing tricks? Zhang Yi sneered disdainfully. This kind of thing can scare ordinary people, but how can it scare him? To this day, he has killed countless lives with his hands, and his whole body is full of murderous aura. Even if there are strange things, they can only be afraid of him. How can he be afraid? The most important thing is that he has enough strength and confidence. Although I don't know what it is. I just want to destroy it. Zhang Yi raised the black long knife in his hand and waved it lightly forward. The black void power was like a flame, and it quickly rushed towards the sea of blood in front.
Who?
On the sea surface of the large fan-shaped space centered on Zhang Yi, all the bloody corpses were directly decomposed by the void power, without even leaving any residue. Seeing this, the fear in the hearts of others dissipated a lot. As long as they can be killed, they're not the kind of evil things that are difficult to deal with. Go, kill them. Something is playing tricks. Deji shouted loudly. The aliens present came to their senses, immediately took out their weapons, and began to attack the corpses. Puff, 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 puff. At this moment, a series of black shadows suddenly jumped out from the corpses and rushed towards the people on the boat. They had not been prepared before and had let them take advantage of the opportunity. Now, everyone focused their attention and immediately saw what they were. They were blood-colored worms, with long and thin bodies and heads as sharp as cones. They were the ones who controlled the corpses to approach, and then used the corpses as cover to attack humans. Chapter 1340, One Demonic People. I didn't expect that there are creatures that can survive in a sea of blood full of corpse poison. The poison-controlling alien said in surprise, as if he couldn't believe what he saw. Everyone attacked together and tried their best to kill these insects. After knowing their true appearance, it was much easier to deal with. Even if there were more insects, there were many masters in the joint forces of the southwest region, and they quickly killed a large number of poisonous insects. Fatty Sue pointed his hands at the surface of the sea of blood and activated the ability of blowing snow, immediately freezing the space within a radius of several miles around. His ability is always more useful where there are liquids. Even in the sea of blood, water is the main component, and soon the surrounding sea of blood was frozen into a hard ice surface. The boat was fixed and the aliens could also go on the ice to fight. Instead, the corpses and insects began to move inconveniently. Uncle Yu held a gun in his hand and started shooting as if the bullets were free. He held the Gatling gun as easily as an ordinary person holding a light machine gun. Those corpses and insects were blasted to pieces by him in large pieces. Haha, the means these people from the demon country used to deal with us are too crude. Uncle Yu laughed. Zhang Yi carried the knife on his shoulder. At this time, there was no need for him to go out and chop. No, if it was in the past, this was a powerful means to stop the people in our world. They raise insects in corpses and then raise them in the sea of blood. The insects survive on corpses and the sea of blood, and they will automatically attack when they encounter living things. If they hadn't encountered us, even ordinary troops would have suffered if they came here. It's not that these insects are not strong enough, but that the strength of their troops is too strong. There are several Epsilon-level aliens alone. There were constant gunfire above the sea of blood, and the body parts of the corpse insects were quickly scattered all over the sea of blood. The dense pieces of meat were quite disgusting. But in the sea of blood, such corpses continued to emerge. Deji shouted loudly, "Don't pay attention to them all the time. This is the way the demons bury corpses. After thousands of years of accumulation, there are countless corpses here. Unless the blood sea is dried up, we can't kill them all. Let's leave quickly. Don't waste time here." Everyone heard this and felt the same way, so they chose to fight and retreat. The surrounding sea area has been frozen by Fatty Sue, but this problem is not a problem at all. Cheongda transformed into a furious King Kong and jumped in front of the team. With just one punch, the huge power directly smashed the thick ice surface. Boom, boom, boom. Cheongda used his fist to directly smash a path of ice. The fleet took advantage of the situation to leave this sea of blood and drove forward at a high speed. Those corpses were relentless and lay flat on the surface of the blood sea, spinning and chasing at a high speed. Although they did not cause much damage to the coalition forces, They were particularly creepy. The coalition forces were numbed and did not want to entangle with such monsters at all, so they could only quickly drive to the other side. Splash! The blood splashed against the hull. Suddenly, the hull of the ship in the front shook violently, and then it was overturned as if it was hit by some huge force. Ah! A scream came, and a huge palm stretched out from the sea of blood, directly squeezing and twisting the body of a soldier, like a person pressing on the sea surface full of water. A large amount of blood and filth flowed down. Liang Yu rushed forward without hesitation, and a bright knife flashed. When the long knife slashed on the huge arm, it made a sound of cutting metal, and the arm was directly cut off, revealing a flat incision. From the sea of blood, a huge head slowly emerged. The head was twice the size of an ordinary person, without hair, and there was a demon eye engraved on the forehead. He slowly emerged from the sea of blood, and his body was more than 4 meters tall. He is from the demon country. He is from the demon country. Seeing the living demon people for the first time, many tantric believers shouted excitedly. They chanted Buddhist mantras to encourage themselves not to be afraid of such monsters. But soon, a greater terror appeared. After the strange demon appeared, the sea of blood surged behind him, and strange figures stood up from the sea of blood. This demon, who was more than 4 meters tall, was actually of average size. Behind him, there were demons who were 5 or 6 meters tall, and even giants who were nearly 10 meters tall slowly stood up. Their eyes had no emotions, staring at the foreign coalition forces here, like small mountains standing in front of the fleet. Zhang Yi finally understood why the door had to be built so huge. Because the people of the Demon Kingdom are much larger than ordinary humans. This is not a human, right? Zhou Kuer's voice came from the communication channel. Although they were in the shadow space, they did not slack off. Everyone performed their duties and waited for the opportunity to play their role. The moment they saw those demons, Zhou Kuer and Yang Xinxin flipped through the historical materials and began to explore. The people of the Demon Kingdom are indeed much larger than ordinary people. There is a record in the history of the pre-Qin period that a guerrilla general went on an expedition to the Qianrong and hunted down a giant 5 meters tall. It is normal for the body size to increase after being immersed in it for a long time because it looks more terrifying. In ancient times, there were many strange people and things in Huashu Kingdom. Some people were born with double pupils, some had arms that went beyond their knees, and some had ribs connected in a row. In ancient times, it was believed that this was the appearance of an extraordinary person, and he would definitely achieve great things in the future. Perhaps these people were the awakened ones in the early days, and therefore they could achieve achievements that others could not achieve. Amitabha. Buddha's believers, purify these sinful demons. Deji stood at the bow and said coldly, "Kill." The roar echoed above the sea of blood. They came here to conquer the demon kingdom. Now that the enemy is right in front of them, they will certainly not be afraid of a fight. To die for the protection of faith, one can enter the Western paradise after death, so everyone rushed forward fearlessly to fight these giants. The burial master and Zhang Yi and others did not make any move. Although these terrifying demons look scary, they do not have the power of the Ypsilon level. If the demon kingdom is really like the underground of the Qinling mountains, there must be Ypsilon level strongmen. They need to conserve their energy and wait for the critical moment to take action. On the side of the Pudge family, it was still Fatty Sue who took the lead and froze the sea of blood. Otherwise, most of the soldiers would not have the ability to fight in the seawater. Cheongda commanded his soldiers to attack the demons in an orderly manner. Among these people, Liang Yu's performance was the most dazzling. Boom! A demon with a height of 7 or 8 meters swung his long arms and smashed down at the soldiers in front of him like a long whip. The faces of several soldiers changed, and they barely dodged it. The ice under them quickly broke, and bloody ice chips flew everywhere. The power of these demons was too huge. Even if they were wearing combat uniforms, ordinary people could hardly bear their power. But they observed carefully that these demons were only huge in size, but did not have any special abilities. So, at this time, Liang Yu's opportunity to show off came. In close combat, she ranked first in the entire coalition. Not counting a few Ypsilons, no one should be her opponent. She ran quickly on the ice, and the ice under her feet broke under her feet. A hurricane passed by, and the person had already taken off into the air. A giant turned his head and greeted him only with Liang Yu's sword light. The blue qi wrapped around Liang Yu's body, and with the swing of the long sword, it directly cut off half of the giant's head from the middle. Dear viewers, thanks for staying tuned. Please like and comment if not already.